All right, today we're diving into a really powerful document. It's a formal petition that's been filed in Iowa. But, this isn't just any old request. What we're looking at here is a meticulously built legal case. It uses the state's own public records to demand something big, a mandatory audit of its entire child welfare system. And trust me, the case it lays out is, well, it's staggering. It all starts with a few key numbers that really set the stage.
So the first number is 26. That's 26 years of evidence that's at the heart of this thing. And let's be clear, we're not talking about a couple of bad years or some recent crisis. No. The whole point here is that for more than a quarter century, official reports have been documenting the exact same critical failures over and over again. It's like an unbroken chain of risk that just never got fixed.
And that leads us to the next number, which is 3. And this is where it gets incredibly tough, because we're talking about the human cost. The petition builds its case around the preventable deaths of 3 children. And what's so critical here is that each of these tragedies was investigated by the state's own ombudsman. Those official reports, and you'll see them referred to as attachments 24, 25, and 26, they really form the narrative backbone of this entire argument. Okay, so beyond the devastating human toll, there's also a massive financial cost. And we're talking about a cost to taxpayers. That number is $14.2 million. And get this, that's the settlement the state paid out for just one of those fatalities, the death of Sabrina Ray. The petition makes a really strong point here. This isn't just some payout for a tragedy. It's presented as the measurable financial price tag for repeated systemic failure.
And now for the number that really anchors the whole petition, 78%. This is the core finding. What the petitioners did was analyze 37 different official reports, going back decades. And what they found was a 78% failure rate in what they call the policy-practice gap. What does that mean? It's the gap between what the rules say must happen to keep a child safe and what actually happens on the ground. This number, they argue, is the mathematical proof of a system in total breakdown. And yeah, we're going to show you exactly how they got there. So here's the bottom line, the whole point of this petition. It's built to prove that these tragedies aren't just isolated incidents or a few sad stories. It's an ironclad case built on evidence to show a predictable, decades-long pattern of failure. And importantly, a pattern that's been confirmed by everyone, federal reviewers, state investigators, you name it. So let's walk through that evidence, layer by layer. All right, part 1. The petition is really smart about how it builds its case. It's like it's laying bricks, one on top of the other, layering evidence from all these different official sources. And the goal is simple, to show that none of these problems are new. These are issues that have been officially documented and then, crucially, ignored for years, often by the very agencies that were supposed to be fixing them. So the first layer comes right from the top, the federal government. See, for decades, the feds have done these big multi-year reviews of Iowa's system. Think of it like a federal report card. It's called the Child and Family Services Review, or CFSR for short. Now, what the petition does in Attachment 2 is pretty powerful. It pulls together 18 years of these federal findings all into one place. And what that most recent federal review found is, well, it's just stunning. A 91% deficiency rate. Let that sink in. A 91% failure rate in one of the most basic fundamental jobs a child welfare system has, checking to make sure kids who are already in the system are actually safe. The petitioner argues this isn't some small clerical error. It's a catastrophic breakdown of a core function. And remember, this is the federal government saying this, not just the petitioners. Okay, so now let's add the next layer to the case. The petition brings in the findings from Iowa's own independent watchdog, the state ombudsman. And guess what? Time and time again, the ombudsman's investigations point to the exact same failures that the federal reports were flagging. It's like an echo.
There's this quote in Attachment 23 that's just so powerful. It talks about administrative inertia. So what does that even mean? It's a fancy way of saying the state's own watchdog found a culture where safety rules are just ignored. It's not that they don't have the rules on the books, it's a systemic refusal to follow them. Year after year, this system is just sidestepping its own safety net. All right, now we're going to pivot. We're moving from the abstract data in all these reports to the real-world consequences, because the petition makes it crystal clear. These documented failures aren't just theoretical problems. They argue that these failures led directly to the preventable deaths of children. So this timeline, it connects those 3 tragic deaths that the ombudsman investigated. You'll find them in attachments 24, 25, and 26.
And you see, they spanned 17 years. The petition's point is that these weren't random, isolated tragedies. They were the predictable, heartbreaking outcomes of the very system failures everyone had been warning about for years.
And when you look at them side by side like this, wow, the pattern is just devastating. Okay, let's break it down. In 2000, with Shelby Dewis, the Ombudsman's report, that's attachment 24, found that critical hotline records were actually destroyed. Okay? Fast forward 16 years to Natalie Fing's case, attachment 25. 10 abuse reports were made in 11 months. The system rejected 80% of them. Just a year later, with Sabrina Ray, attachment 26, the rejection rate hit 100%. The Ombudsman found a state contractor was actively suppressing the reports. You can see it right there. The system's most basic job, just listening to abuse reports, got progressively, terrifyingly worse.
Let's just zero in on Natalie Finn's case for a second, because it really is a perfect snapshot of the whole breakdown. That chart shows the 80% rejection rate we just talked about, but what the petition stresses is who was making these reports. These weren't anonymous tips from a stranger. These were coming from mandated reporters. We're talking school principals, nurses, people who were legally required to report suspected abuse. The professionals were screaming for help, and the system just put its fingers in its ears. Okay, so now that the stage is set, we've seen the history of ignored warnings, we've seen the tragic human cost. The petition moves in for what you could call its analytical kill shot. It's about to prove with cold, hard data that these failures are not just stories. They are mathematically, undeniably systemic. So that brings us to the big question, right? Are these failures really systemic, or are they just a series of tragic but separate anecdotes? This is the question the petition absolutely has to answer. It's like they're anticipating the counter-argument. Oh, these are just isolated incidents. And they built a tool specifically to shut that argument down for good. And this is that tool. This is attachment 28, what they call the systemic failure matrix. Think of it as the engine driving this entire petition. It takes almost 3 decades of data from all the federal reviews, the state audits, the fatality reports, and it puts them all into one giant spreadsheet, basically. It cross-references everything to find the patterns, to see which failures pop up again and again and again. And the results it spits out, well, they're stark. Remember that 78% number? That's what this matrix found. The single most common failure showing up in 78% of all those official reports is the gap between the rules on paper and what happens in reality. To put it simply, nearly 8 out of every 10 times an official body looked at the system, they found it wasn't following its own rules. And look at the others, failures in basic paperwork, monitoring, supervision, they all showed up in more than half of the reports. This is the mathematical proof they were looking for. These aren't glitches. This is how the system operates.
But the argument doesn't stop there. This is where it makes a really crucial pivot. The petition says, okay, this isn't just a history lesson. The final, devastating step is to show that the exact same risk factors that led to children dying in the past are still active today, right now, creating a clear and present danger for kids in the system. I mean, look at this comparison. It draws a direct and frankly chilling line from the past to the present. On the left, you've got a key reason Sabrina Ray died. From attachment 26, state contractors just dropped the ball on abuse reports. Now look at the right. This is a current risk. Documented in attachment 27, there are 8 children right now living with a caregiver who has a felony conviction for child endangerment that caused bodily injury. The argument is undeniable. The system's deadly tolerance for risk is exactly the same.
And just so you know, they're not just making this up. The petition provides irrefutable proof. We're not talking about allegations here. Attachment 29 includes the actual court dockets. These are official court records confirming these felony convictions. It's concrete, undeniable proof that children, today, are in the care of people who have been criminally convicted of hurting kids.
So let's just recap the whole case they've built. It's like a closing argument with 4 inescapable points. Step 1, they establish decades of ignored warnings from both federal and state officials. Step 2, they show the devastating, repeating human cost of not listening to those warnings. Step 3, they bring out the math, proving these failures are systemic, not just random accidents. And finally, step 4, they prove there's a clear and present danger to children in the system right now.
And it all comes down to this one final equation, which they pull right from their analysis in Attachment 28. They take the 78% failure rate, they add the evidence of active risks today, plus that 20-year pattern of deaths, and they say it all equals systemic control failure. Now, that's not just a dramatic phrase. That is the precise legal term from Iowa law, specifically Iowa Code Section 11, that triggers a mandatory audit. Not optional, mandatory.
And so, in the end, the petition leaves the state auditor, and really all of us, with one powerful question. When you're faced with this mountain of evidence, nearly 3 decades of the state's own reports, a clear pattern of preventable deaths, the mathematical proof of a broken system, and concrete evidence of kids in danger today, is a full independent audit really just an option? Or is it a legal and moral obligation that simply can't be ignored?